So in last week's reading by Leanne Simpson, she quotes Martineau and Risques in saying, "The freedom realized through flight and refusal is the freedom to imagine and create an elsewhere in the here, a present future beyond the imaginative and territorial bounds of colonialism. It is a performance of other worlds, an embodied practice of flight." So in this week and next, we'll be discussing how as early childhood educators, we might first begin this work by paying attention, by noticing seemingly invisible structures of settler colonialism and neoliberalism at play in our lives and work. So we'll be continuing our discussions of how developmental psychology might work as a tool in Canada's ongoing settler colonial project, and how these banalities of developmental psychology are so often ingrained in our practice that we don't notice them. So in your Pecha Kucha assignments, you'll be unpacking, deconstructing, and closely examining your chosen topic. So thinking beyond the familiar, looking at it very closely, and exploring its dimensions with a critical lens. So looking at how this topic functions within colonialism and neoliberalism, examining how this topic is socially constructed and reproduced by people within particular value schemes. So this does not mean that you'll be painting an image of how you think your topic ought to be or how you think it should be lived. But this assignment is rather intended to encourage you to notice norms that go unnoticed, to ask questions, and grapple with meanings. So this is not coming from a place of morality, of right or wrong. You shouldn't be assigning blame as you look at your topic, or advocating for how you think things should be. This is not an exercise in advocacy, but rather you'll need to look beyond the surface of this topic and really pay attention to the questions that you're asking. So we're not looking to provide answers, but really unpack and take a critical look at the dimensions of this topic and how this topic matters. So for example, looking beyond the surface of the topic, an example might be looking at multiculturalism, which is one of the topics that's available to you. So if you select this topic, you should not be advocating for why we need to be multicultural and the benefits of multiculturalism, but rather you need to unpack this concept and consider where it comes from, how it functions within a settler society, and how it functions within the state. So in our reading this week by Africa Taylor and Veronica Pacini-Ketchebel, they write that in neoliberal regimes, discourses of tolerance of diversity can be seen as a form of governmentality. This is within reference to multiculturalism. They have the effect of managing Indigenous people along with all other ethnic others in a multicultural, in brackets, white, settler colonial society, through bestowing them rights to have their own culture recognized, but at the same time still subjugating them to the normalizing expectations of the dominant settler culture. So this is similar to our conversations last week when we talked about how these discourses of diversity end up appropriating difference into the same. So this is also something at play when we're discussing multiculturalism. How do discourses of multiculturalism as an ideal in Canada appropriate difference into the same? How does it strive to fix others into a settler colonial framework of value? So lastly, I encourage you to use the readings to help you with this assignment. The questions that I've provided for you in your weekly collaboratories are intended to help you with this. At this point, we are deconstructing, unpacking, and teasing out our ideas, and again, not presenting answers or solutions. So in this assignment, you are to really unpack, look deeply, and consider how you might be implicated in the operations of this topic. So this week's reading prompts us to ask the question of how we might best confront and respond to these colonialist legacies and the challenges that it places in our work with young children. It asks us to consider how we might pay attention to the, quote, ways in which colonialist discourses and other manifestations of them in the current neoliberal era still structure our thinking, influence the ways in which we understand ourselves, and affect our practices and relations. So this is where we can really attend to the symbolic, to the physical manifestations of settler colonialism in our lives and in our work with young children. So your Pecha Kucha assignment is due on November 13th. I've changed the assignment date, due date to be a little bit later, as I realize now that November 11th is a holiday. So your assignments will be due on November 13th at 11:55 p.m. And again, in this assignment, you're to create a Pecha Kucha style PowerPoint with a recorded voice commentary, which traces a key concept of the course and provokes further questions into this concept. So the purpose of this assignment is to artfully express your understanding and curiosities of a key course concept, to situate this concept within your life world, so within your daily practice with children or just life in general, and examine how it comes to matter in your life world. So you may choose to think with one of the following concepts and do this from a critical lens. So some ideas might be childhoods, gender, progress or development, colonization, settler colonization, age, care, multiculturalism, ability, individualism, time, neoliberalism, growth, or autonomy. And if you have another idea that you'd like to work with, just run that by me and we can have a conversation about that. So note that this is not purely a summary of course content, though you are to think with the readings, but an artistic composition of how you are making sense of a key concept. So as you do this, you may notice that your topic is entangled with other concepts here. And I invite you to stay with your specific topic, but also present how this concept is in relation with developmental psychology, how it's entangled with settler colonialism and neoliberalism. So this assignment is not only interested in what you know, but rather what is puzzling, incomplete, and tensioned. So think with the following questions as you compose this piece. How might you introduce the concept? How does this concept show up in ordinary moments or daily routines? So with this said, you could choose a series of moments or routines, or you can choose to highlight one specific moment that you think really illuminates this concept. What are the historical origins of this concept? How does this concept function in physical spaces, materials, and in minds? So thinking about that movement from the physical manifestation to the symbol and how that symbol makes its way into our own subjectivities and minds. What does it do? So what tensions do you sit with as you pay attention to this concept? How are you implicated in its construction? What are your questions about this concept? What do you grapple with? What is hopeful? And what might your questions about this concept mean pedagogically? And I encourage you to stay with questions, especially as you consider this last question, because what I don't want you to do is advocate for solutions to implement into practice. This is much more about unpacking and getting a sense of the dimensions of this topic and its effects. So this does not mean, like thinking with these questions, you don't need to explicitly answer every question, but you will need to show in a very concise and intentional way how you're grappling with some of these questions through a meaningful composition of photo and spoken word. So know that you only have 20 seconds for each photo and the oral component. So you'll need to rehearse this, I think, before you record yourself, because it can be a little bit tedious to be exactly on time. So I strongly encourage you to revisit the assignment document and the rubric that's posted on Moodle to get a closer sense of how this assignment will be graded. And also a note on aesthetics. In art-based assignments such as the Pecha Kucha, there are certain things that matter. And borrowing from Elliot Eisner in his book, The Arts and the Creation of Mind, we must bring our attention to how the arts, within the arts, small differences can have large effects. So the quality of image, tone of voice, and how one photo flows to another are very important. These are things that matter. The aesthetic and content should work together to provoke an effectual response. Your Pecha Kucha should be collected as a well-organized and aesthetically nuanced digital composition that traces your meaning making throughout this course, thinking with this concept. Yes, so anything else that I need to add here? All work should be well designed and show a meaningful engagement with the course readings, ideas, and concepts. So in arts-based work such as this, time matters, your pace matters. Make sure that you allow also enough time to write and to rewrite and to edit and to revise and design, because I think you'll notice that these things do take some time. Make sure that the images that you're using are expressive and intentional. These images should be in dialogue with your oral words, and they should work well together. And also these images should be original photographs, so you won't be using Google Images. So also in arts-based work, metaphor and suggestion matters. So think about how you can evoke an experience using images and spoken word rather than only presenting something that you already know. So being mindful about avoiding a cliche or coming too directly at something in a way which suggests an idea that we already know very well about this topic. So for example, if you're using photos from nature to speak about the topic of growth, you'll need to think creatively and critically and rethinking growth beyond a simple level. So beyond showing like flowers growing in a forest, how might growth be pictured in a way that is tensioned, complex, and points to some of the difficult and contradictory past-present histories that we've been discussing in this course. How might you use photos and your spoken word to sit in those tensions and to stay with them and think carefully with them? So how might you avoid a direct representation and rethink, recompose growth in new and interesting ways? So stretch your assumptions and try something out.